La catedrática
Professor Schiebinger has emphasized the conclusions of various studies carried out. She's told us about 3 specific solutions, including fixing the numbers, fixing the institutions, structural changes, so that everyone's careers can prosper on a level playing field, and fixing knowledge through gender-responsive innovation and intersectional analysis. Well, she's made it clear that we cannot change the numbers if we don't change knowledge, and I think that that implies, among others, addressing the problem of big data, which is based on 45% of the US perception of the world is represented when they only represent 4% of the total world population. Algorithms contain biases, so access to knowledge is neither objective or neutral. And men are up to 5 times more likely to be offered high-paid senior management positions. Intersectionality in the analysis of knowledge is also vital to identify ethnic biases, which discriminate in health for reasons of skin color, and which extends to other areas, of course, where women add more biases to their gender condition. So these biases imply exposure to a lack of safety for transgender people because they don't adequately identify themselves, and this lack of neutrality has a direct relationship in global warming and the study of animals. And how does all this translate into the organizational culture of institutions and organizations? So the next roundtable will answer these and other questions. We'll be talking about the commitment to equality of the stakeholders of the scientific and technological ecosystem. This session will be chaired by Leyre Madariaga, Director of Digital Transformation and Entrepreneurship at the Basque government. A warm round of applause for her. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much. I would like to thank Emakunde for having me here, and congratulations on this conference. Because I believe it is key to talk about these issues together. We've heard an inspiring presentation by Professor Schiebinger on innovation and gender. And so we'll be picking up where the previous panel left off, panel chaired by Pilar Calzada. Now we're going to be, in this roundtable, we're going to be talking with experts about how gender-based policies are implemented by the different stakeholders in science and technology. And we're going to be having, first of all, Inmaculada Arostegui Madariaga, Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of the Basque Country. We'll also be having Fernando Cossío, Scientific Director of Ikerbasque. Again, Silvia Rueda, Director of the Women and Science Unit at the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation. And finally, Rikardo Bueno, General Director of the Basque Scientific and Technological Consortium, BRTA. So, just as we've done in the previous roundtable, each one of the experts will be having 8 minutes to tell us what they do, what they're doing now in their institutions, and then we'll have time to talk and, of course, take some questions. There will be time in the end for Q&A from the floor. So if you all agree, maybe we can start. Inmaculada, the floor is yours. And I will make the most now to highlight the knowledge, because we were talking earlier on about fixing the knowledge. So I'm going to be introducing the participants. Inmaculada Arostegui Madariaga is a doctor in mathematics at the University of the Basque Country. She's currently full-time professor in statistics at the Faculty of Science and Technology in Galdacao, and she's a researcher at the Basque Center for Applied Mathematics. She works on biostatistics, and she's interested in health services. And she has published more than 75 scientific papers. She has participated in a number of different research projects and also with companies. She's been the main researcher in many projects and at a national and international level. And she has led 5 PhD theses. She's been a member. I'm speaking really fast, and sometimes I can't really find my words. She's been a member of the Ethics Committee at the University of the Basque Country. She's a member of the Spanish Society of Biostatistics, and so on and so forth. She mainly works on statistics, and now, yes, Imma, you have the floor. The floor is all yours. Yes, go ahead. Thank you very much indeed, Leyre. I feel a bit embarrassed when you say so many things about me. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I would like to thank Emakunde for inviting me here today. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you. And I'm here to talk about the commitment with equality and from the perspective of the technological and scientific ecosystem of the University of the Basque Country. I will say that the University of the Basque Country has a strategic plan that is cross-cutting and that includes different elements related to the inclusion of gender perspective in a systematic and comprehensive way. Specifically, the strategic plan mentions a strong point where the main goal is that the University of the Basque Country can consolidate itself as a benchmark. Another objective of this strategic plan is promoting gender equality in leadership. And we have this academic program at the University of the Basque Country. It's been up and running for 6 years now, and it concentrates on the leadership of researchers. And this is something I wanted to mention here. We also have a research plan that mentions the gender equality as a very specific objective in our professional development. And we also have a number of different plans on equality where parity and the gender perspective are included. And they also include a positive discrimination to foster participation by women, especially in leadership. And then more specifically, if we look at the third plan on equality, which is the one that is up and running now at the University of the Basque Country, we will see that we have 2 specific actions here. In this context, one aimed to promote gender perspective among researchers, and then fostering gender equality and fostering gender perspective in research. So here, we're touching upon what we are researching into and who is researching. Both elements are included in this strategic axis of the University of the Basque Country. The first action includes specific activities like subsidies, PhD theses that look into gender and the gender perspective. There is a prize called Micaela Portilla to the best PhD thesis on feminist or gender-based studies. And then we have specific initiatives to promote gender research projects. This applies to at a national Spanish level and also at a European level. The second action would be aimed to foster gender balance and fostering gender perspective in research. And here we have systematic methodological training courses and research on the use of inclusive language, which may sound trivial, but we haven't quite managed to use it broadly, and then a number of workshops on scientific production. We also work on specific assessment criteria to assess research projects. And here we have an ethics committee at the university, we will talk about this later on, that assesses research projects. This is something relevant because very often this will be defining what we will be researching into. And then we also have a third element here, which is that we want to foster technical criteria for projects that have a gender perspective. And here we have some guidelines concerning best practices. The fourth activity here would be making women's scientific production visible. Here we have a website that has been developed at the University of the Basque Country called Berdintasuna, that is aimed at making this work visible. And then last but not least, the idea is to share experiences, since visibility and dissemination is essential. And here we want to share experiences among, and we're talking here about research experiences and research studies that have this gender perspective. And we have here a specific chair. So this is all concerning the latest question about what we are doing right now, what type of policies are being implemented at the University of the Basque Country. So many things are being done, and we should also look at some facts, some figures, right? Taking into consideration all professors at the university. Here we have some balanced numbers. There's a balance between men and women, especially in the earlier stage of our career. But then figures change. We have this scissors effect, where as we move forward in a chair, we only have 20% women. And when we look at how we attract talent, and probably Fernando will have more data about this, the percentage of women does not reach 30%. And so this is telling us that there are two sides to the coin. Also, the percentage of women that are main researchers and lead research projects accounts to 40%. It doesn't seem to be that bad, but only 38% of PhD theses in the University of the Basque Country are directed by women. And I would finish my presentation by saying that I think that these elements are especially relevant when we measure this, looking at the different areas. An exhaustive analysis of the consolidated groups at the University of the Basque Country, which is the unit where research is carried out. Then the percentage of women that are main researchers is 40%. You may think that there's no deviation here, but the percentage of women that are main researchers in solitary, I mean all by themselves, only represent 25%. It's only 25%. If you look at the different areas in experimental sciences, engineering and architecture, this percentage is below 20%. So yes, we do have active policies to foster participation, to get good figures, as Professor Schrebinger said, but then reality is quite different. So this is telling us that we need to keep working on all these topics. Thank you very much indeed.
Corro, ¿qué les pasa?
Eskerrik asko, Inma, muy interesante.
Thank you very much, Inma. That was very interesting. And we'll have an opportunity to talk about this a little bit later on. Now, on the program, there's a fifth speaker. Unfortunately, for personal problems, Susana Belaustegi is not going to be here today. So we're now going to pass the floor to Fernando Cossío. He's going to be telling us the perspective from Ikerbasque. He has a degree in chemical sciences from the University of Zaragoza and a PhD in chemical science also from the University of the Basque Country. After having research days in the CNRS des Talents in France and the UCLA in the US, in 1988 he joined the chemistry faculty of the University of the Basque Country, where he was promoted to professor full professor in 2002. And since 2009, he is now the scientific director of Ikerbasque, the Basque Foundation for Science. His outstanding scientific contribution in the field of bioorganic chemistry and molecular modeling has actually awarded him, he's won some prizes as a result of that. Fernando, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organisers for organising the conference and for inviting me to speak here as well. So, as Pro-Vice Chancellor Arostegui also did, I would like to outline our different strategic areas, the ones that we are pursuing in Ikerbasque. The Ikerbasque, which is the Basque Foundation for Science, is a relatively small organisation. We're talking about more or less about 342 researchers working there. And they create about 1,700 research posts, which is no mean feat, of course. But we are, of course, talking about fairly small organizations, especially when we're comparing them to the figures for the Basque Country in general. So, at Ikerbasque, we draw up strategic plans. The one that we have at the moment is number 7. And it says challenge 7 of that plan. The challenge 7 is to make sure that more than 40% of newcomers, those who are hired as newcomers in Ikerbasque, need to be women. So, in order to ensure this, in all of our calls, we have to carry out a SWOT analysis. So, in recent years, we have been able to comply with this goal, making sure that 40% of new hires are women, at least 40%. And in fact, in some cases, we've had peaks of 50%, etc. It's like a sawtooth shape, the graph, but the mean needs to be more or less around 50%. Sometimes it'll be 50%, sometimes it'll be 40%, but we want it to be around that midway mark all the time. Now, it's not enough just to carry out general measures. It's important to make sure that Ikerbasque receives as many applications from men as from women in order to ensure gender parity. This is what's important. It's also important. We also have positions which are research fellows. Now they're 5-year contracts. And for the first year, we carry out an assessment. Then they are promoted to associate. Then they're associated to professor. So that's the sort of the progression that our researchers go through. We want to make sure that we're not just attracting new hires, not just recruiting female researchers in terms of gender parity, but we also need to have similar rates of success or stabilization. They need to stay there and move up through the ranks just as much as men do. If we look at some of the initial figures, the number of applications from women were lower in the past. There was a big difference as well. As the years have gone by, we've gradually come to a better balance with regard to the number of applications that we receive. And then with regard to success rates, the success rates are quite low for everyone, about 20%, because Ikerbasque is a foundation that has a very strict policy with regard to who it promotes. It requires a very high level of scientific excellence. So there is a very low success rate overall, but the success rates, our aim is that the success rate will be similar for men and for women. But of course, if we receive fewer applications from women and the success rate is similar, then the number of research professors or female research professors, of course, will be lower as well. So it's really important to look at new hires as well. Now, we discovered something here, and it's the recruitment capacity for women is much greater when female researchers are younger. After a certain moment in time, when women get to a certain stage in their career, because of the scissors effect that we saw earlier. So, for example, we talk about senior researchers. When we're talking about them, the harm has already been done and there's very little we can do. But in the case of younger female researchers, and Commissioner Uriarte was talking about this earlier, if we look at the number of
es igual o incluso ligero.
We have to make sure that this scissors effect doesn't occur. So as a result of this, we have engaged in different programs within Horizon Europe, etc., and with co-funding to try to attract young researchers to Ikerbasque. We've been quite successful with this. Younger researchers, among young researchers, we have almost achieved gender parity. And as we move up the age ranges, you can see that the proportion of women is much lower. This is what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, because, you know, in inverted commas, the harm seems to have already been done when we're talking about older female researchers. So, if we can continue to make sure that the success rate among young female researchers is the same as among young male researchers, then I believe that this problem will be redressed over time. And really, just to finish, well, just before I do, another indicator of this indirect success, an indicator that tells us that we're on the right path, are the success rates in applications with calls put out by the European Research Council. Ikerbasque currently has 20 ERC projects that are active, and over the past year we've been quite successful in our calls for funding in the applications that we have submitted, and we have actually achieved 8 ERCs, and of these 8 projects, 5 are female researchers. Now, the ERC is an instrument for elite research, very, very competitive research. It's also an indirect indicator of the level, the quality of the applications that you send in, because they're very, very competitive calls. Nowhere does it say what percentage of our ERCs need to be awarded in the Basque Country, etc. So it doesn't. If your application isn't good enough, it won't be accepted, no matter where you come from. There's no quotas. So we had 8 accepted, and of these 8, 5 of these projects are led by women. And I think that's a very good indicator that things are being done well, properly, and that we are doing well in terms of attracting and retaining talent, female talent in particular. Now, logically, there are some biases that Professor Sayen mentioned earlier in physical sciences, physics, chemistry, etc. Life and medical sciences And then we have engineering and technology and social sciences and humanities. You can see that in physical sciences and experimental sciences, physics and chemistry basically is what we're talking about here. This is what we can see in red. We only have 20% women. In life and medical sciences, the number of women increases slightly, up to just over 20%. And there's quite an unexpected result here, because in engineering and technology, we have a slightly higher percentage of women in comparison to physical sciences, and in social sciences and humanities, this is where we have the highest number of female researchers. So just to briefly go over the main areas of our action plan, because we align our gender plan with our strategic plan. Some of the actions that we carry out are monitoring everything that we do from a gender perspective, develop an equality policy in accordance with international benchmarks, monitoring everything we do, as said, with reference to what's happening at an international level, carrying out an assessment study of different posts and positions in order to establish our remuneration policy. We need to prioritize the recruitment of women, or establishing profiles that are more likely to attract female researchers. We're also going to prioritize the incorporation of women into our assessment committee, because it's really important to have female evaluators as well if we really want to make sure that equality plans are effective in the field of scientific research. And with regards to people management, we foster the exchange of opinions between all members of our team. We need to develop and establish and make visible sexual harassment protocols, or protocols to fight against sexual harassment and harassment on the grounds of sex, because it's important to remember that research is quite stressful, so we have to also look to team management and make sure that there is equality in team management, because managing stress is important, and sometimes when things get stressful, some things fall by the wayside, etc. Oh, we also have some other actions. For example, actions 12 and 13 are very important, and they're linked, in fact, because we want to generalize role models and make them visible for women, and develop a manual for inclusive language. And we also need to recognize and acknowledge female researchers. So these are all connected, these different actions. It's important to highlight the presence of female researchers at different levels of their career, at a junior level and at a senior level, and to give them a greater degree of visibility in society, so that we can create role models for female students and secondary school students, so that they can see examples and role models of what they can be, and this would hopefully inspire them to decide to pursue a research career. So women who carry out research need to be seen and portrayed as interesting people, and who can provide something that maybe younger researchers would like to copy and emulate. And this is just very, very briefly what we're doing and some of our results. Some of the results are very positive, and I think we're going in the right direction. But as we can see, there is still quite a lot of room for improvement. Thank you very much indeed.
Eskerrik asko, Fernando, muy interesante.
Thank Thank you very much, Fernando. That was really interesting. I like that your focus on younger female researchers before it's too late. Silvia, it's your turn now. She is the director of the Women in Science department at the Spanish Ministry for Science and Innovation. I will briefly read part of her CV. She is an IT engineer and she has a PhD in computer engineering from the University of Valencia. She is currently a member of the Spanish Ministry for Science and Innovation, and she's the director of the Women and Science department. From 2022 to 2023, she was a territorial director of the Council for Innovation, University Science and the Digital Society in Valencia. She lectures in computer engineering at the University of Valencia, and she was in fact director of that department from 2015 to 2021. And her research areas include virtual reality and graphic IT, software engineering, and the digital divide, the digital and gender divide. She has been head of the STEM department also within the Pro-Vice-Chancellor's Office of Equality, Diversity and Sustainability. And she is also the director of the Digital and Gender Digital Divide Chair at the University of Valencia. So Silvia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. So I've been asked to talk twice. I hope I won't repeat myself. I'll try very hard not to. Now, I would like to talk now about the commitments undertaken by the Department of Gender Equality within the Ministry of Science and Innovation. So what are our commitments? This is what I'm going to be focusing on now. Now, this morning, we were talking about the aim of our department, what we're trying to achieve. And I was talking about how we work at both a national and a European level, and how we try to coordinate the different public research bodies that are funded by the ministry, and how also we carry out our own actions in the field of gender equality in research and development, and we participate in different organizations to try to generate networks. At a European level, we represent Spain in the ERA forum. We make action proposals and we bring them to the attention of the ERA. And we also work to transfer best practices from Europe to Spain. What are some of our specific areas of action? Well, one would be to carry out an in-depth diagnosis of the gender gaps which still persist in our science, technology and innovation system, to make the contribution made by female researchers and innovators much more visible within the field of research, development and innovation. We're working to eliminate gender biases in both selection and assessment. We advise and train people in order to bring about a change in organizational culture so that we can have safer, fairer and more diverse environments. And we work to foster the integration of the gender dimension in all research and development contents. So this is what we do. And now I just wanted to talk in a little bit more depth about some of our commitments. I don't have time to talk about everything that we do, but I would like to prioritize some of the most important ones and to just focus on some of the principal commitments that we have in our department. I only joined the department recently. So when you get somewhere, go somewhere new and you join a new team, it's always important to try to make a contribution, but to know what's already there. So with regard to gender-based violence and its elimination, this is the basis of everything, basically. for us. If the environment isn't safe, then nothing else makes sense. Nothing else can be done. The very, very first thing that we need to do is to work to eradicate all types of gender-based or sex-based violence. Now, it's not easy, but we do need to focus on victims. Victims need to have all the guarantees they need. They need to have a right to reparation. And we need to make a major effort to prevent these situations from happening before they occur. In Europe, each country has its own legislation, way of reacting to this type of event, but we shouldn't focus on that. What we should focus on is to making not so much on the punitive side of things, but on the preventive side of things. We want to prevent these actions happening, these events happening before they even do. So we need to focus on prevention. We need to coordinate with Europe and other people working in Europe. There are many different projects. In fact, I'm going this afternoon to another conference in Bilbao, which is focusing just on that particular issue.
¿Paro? Ahora, otro de los compromisos.
Another of our commitments has to do with something that we've been talking about all morning and which is absolutely fundamental. And it has not just to do with the facts and figures. We cannot just be happy with the 50%. It's much more than that. We need to go much further than that. We need to mainstream the gender perspective in all aspects of science and research. And we have a quote here from Londa Sidlinga. We need to be both object and subject of research. And we need to be fully involved and make sure that the results really are geared towards addressing our concerns, and also intersectionality is important. There isn't just one woman. We're not all the same, all of us women. There are many different factors which intersect with our sex or our gender, and we need to make sure that we're not treating all women as if they were the same, because they're not. They're very different. We talked this morning about the new science law and the changes that it's going to bring about, and how we're going to work to include the gender perspective and mainstream the gender perspective in every single thing that we do. And in order for this not to just be an initiative that's being promoted by the ministry, in July, with the royal decree on the gender equality icon, which is what we can see there on the right-hand side. This is a label or an icon that can be used by organizations who are really actually doing something to promote gender equality in the field of research and development and innovation, because it's really important to identify best practices that are being carried out in different organizations and to spread the word about them so that other people can be inspired by them and move forward in this field. So another area has to do with analysing the current situation. So throughout the course of today, we've seen many different graphs with facts and figures telling us about the current situation. But knowing the data, obviously it's important. That's the first step, and it's absolutely fundamental step. But we need to use that in order to identify the root causes and therefore the pathways that we need to follow in order to overcome these divides, these gaps. So the data should be used in order to achieve two things. First of all, when we're asking organizations and companies to provide us with data, we have to do that in such a way as to make sure that it doesn't become a burden for them. Because if we're constantly asking organizations and companies for information and then nothing useful ever comes of it, then they're going to stop sending us this data. So I'm just doing my bit. I'm a computer engineer, so I think we need to use computer engineering and all the tools that it gives us to try to make the data useful, to turn them into something useful, and to help us to disseminate them so that the companies and organizations get some kind of feedback and they see that the data that they're providing us with is actually being used for something. because otherwise you just end up with a document, and it just, it doesn't matter whether it's a book or it's a PDF document, it doesn't matter the format, but sometimes all of this data just becomes a document and nothing actually gets done with it. It gets shut in a drawer. We need to do something more with this data. The data that we generate needs to be useful, really useful for the entire scientific community. And they're actually used in future work. And it's really important also not just to turn the data into information, which is of course really important, but more than that, we need to use that data and that information to analyze the root causes of the problems and to analyze and to explore the different pathways towards finding a resolution. And in this, it's really important to have real life experiences of women who are working in the research and development and innovation fields in order to hear what they have to say. And this is going to be reflected in the report that will be published next year, which will reflect the experiences of real women through in-depth interviews. And this is a project that we have started to work on now. We've also made a lot of headway, and we've also talked a lot today about awareness raising and education. But it is absolutely fundamental. It's fundamental. It's absolutely vital that we change social awareness of what this means. Because if we need to assess everything, assess calls in a fair way, we need to assess the assessors. Who assesses the assessors at the moment? We need to mainstream the gender perspective into all of this so that projects that really could make a difference aren't simply discarded. Unfortunately, even though we try to make sure that commissions have gender parity, even if they do have gender parity, that doesn't mean per se that the gender perspective has been mainstreamed into all the decisions. We need to raise awareness among the people who are sitting on these different boards or commissions so that they can actually put the gender perspective into practice. We're working a lot on that now, but we're going to continue to work, and we have to continue to work on that in the future. There are certain areas and certain commissions, for example, those working in the field of technology. We've got a lot of work to do there. Their parity, we're a long way from reaching gender parity in the makeup of these commissions. So our aim is to provide the advice and support required and the training required within the agency and also outside. And we also want to work towards setting up an observatory or developing a new model for the observatory, which will be much more open, much more participatory, because we need to change the institutions from within so that we can really reflect all the different people who are involved in the system, listen to what their needs are, listen to what their concerns are, and listen to their expert opinions.
In order to foster all of this, we work in collaboration with other ministries. For instance, in the initiative by the Ministry for Education and Vocational Training for the defense of female talent. We work together hand in hand, and we also at the ministry we carry out a number of different activities from our platform, Scientific and Innovative. This is the platform we've got in order to make women visible, and we annually celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, and we publish all the activities that are carried out in Spain. And here I would like to insist on one thing. It is very important to make visible all the cases of women that are successful, to prove that we can also lead, that we can also be leaders. And this is fundamental for girls and boys. We need to show them ordinary women, real women, and let's stop saying that all women need to be excellent. I mean, it is science and technology that need to be excellent, but made by ordinary people. Otherwise, we're exaggerating. We can't actually be up to the rise to the expectations, right? I want to defend the fact that we women have the right to have a position, even if we are not excellent, just as men can get a specific position without being the best possible researchers in the world.
Hay mucho esfuerzo de
We make huge efforts. We can't tell girls that have to face many, many issues, that the only way they have to achieve something is by being extraordinary, because we are placing too high expectations on them. So we are all ordinary people, and that's it. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Bueno, Rikardo, lo de la mediocridad...
Rikardo? I'm sure that this last statement will be controversial. I'm talking about ordinary people doing science. Mediocrity, I think, is something we need to defend. I think that cooperating or working together is more important. Let's not just value competitiveness, because it's like we need to be competitive with everyone around us instead of working together. This is a very male-centered vision, I think.
Pasamos ahora al último ponente.
Let's now move on to the last speaker, Rikardo Bueno, General Director of the BRTA. He has a doctorate in industrial engineering. Before leading BRTA, he worked in Tecnalia, member of BRTA. He had a number of different positions: Director of International Business, Director of Advanced Manufacturing, and he's participated in a number of different European initiatives like ManuFuture, Factory of the Future, or EIT Manufacturing, which is very close to us, by the way. Rikardo, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Leyre? And I would like to thank Emakunde for having me here today. As you may imagine, I have no doubt about who can have the greatest imposter syndrome in here. That's me. Anyhow, let me tell you something about BRTA, the Basque Research and Technology Alliance. This is an alliance where we have 17 research centers and technology centers. You have all the members there, and we also have the provincial governments of Álava, Gipuzkoa and Bizkaia, and also the Basque government. BRTA. At the BRTA, we have 4,300 professionals working on R&D and I, and 2,100 of them are women. We first carried out our equality plan years ago. We've developed it further over time, and all these organizations have their own plan, and they've been working on them longer than us, obviously. Some of them have been very involved and committed to equality. Some of them have actively participated in today's conference, in organizing today's conference. Well, our plan is quite standard, really a standard one. It's based on 4 main axes: good governance, the empowerment of women, the transformation of our economy and our society, and then finally the objective is to have a life where there is no violence against women. But even I think that it's more important, even more important than this plan is the fact that we are working together. There are 17 centers working together here at BRTA, and we are an active alliance. And we have a high transformative potential. We're carrying out actions in order to jointly and in cooperation develop a number of different actions. We want to foster these innovative actions that will solve structural issues that we have. And first of all, we carry out pilot activities that then are developed further and, of course, improved so that we all move forward together towards equality, gender equality. Let me just mention a recent meeting that we've held. We also have a professional career program that we share, all 17 of us share, where we define for each professional level in the field of R&D and what are the requirements that we need to meet. And we believe this will help us to make the criteria more objective, the criteria that we need to progress in our career, so that there is less and less bias and less subjectivity there. And for 2 years, we've had this prize given to the best BRTA researchers. And we have categories, the category of prize for best researcher. We have a prize for a consolidated career. And you see that in this edition, the prize has been given to 2 women. And let me also mention, as I said, a meeting we organized only recently. And you see a picture there at the top of your screen. We brought senior and junior female researchers together so that they could sit around a table and talk to each other about the issues they have to face. All of them, both seniors and juniors, of course. And therefore exchange information about the problems they have and also information about the solutions there could be. You see again some pictures about that. I would like to thank our colleagues from Leyre for their support. And senior female researchers are key in these meetings because they can have this very nice connection with juniors. And we also, of course, work with juniors, and we give them some training sessions to raise awareness. And all of this has helped us to identify some fields of work where we believe we need to concentrate more in the future. We are doing so in some cases individually, but I think we need to join forces because the impact will be greater. And it goes, well, these elements go from STEM training on STEMs, make female researchers more visible, involving the other half of the equation here, meaning men, of course. Because we need to be involved in the process. How can we make working conditions more attractive? How can we look after, and this term looking after is important. How can we look after everyone, and how we can promote leadership, in this case female leadership, of course. At the Basque Research and Technology Alliance, we have a committee on equality where we have representatives from all members. And I think that one of the main conclusions of this meeting I'm telling you about is that this is just an early stage, and all the steps we're taking are early steps, but this needs to go on in the future. Of course, with everybody's implication and involvement. And then I'll leave it here so that there's time for questions and for debate. Thank you very much.
Bueno, eskerrik asko a los...
Thank you very much to all four of you. And Rikardo, with this last reflection, I believe you gave us a good excuse to talk about next steps. All morning long, we've been talking about how to achieve gender equality in science and technology, but we've also talked about this paradigm shift. How can science and technology contribute to gender equality? We can maybe concentrate on the obstacles, right? What are at the university? You mentioned, you gave us some facts and figures of the current situation, which I think are very interesting. I think it's interesting to see how things stand. But what are the obstacles you see in your organization towards this paradigm shift? Well, one of the things I believe are key and could have an impact on two of the elements mentioned by a previous speaker, that were fixing funding and fixing knowledge, is assessment. And I'm talking about the assessment of individuals for their promotion or integration, first of all, and then leadership. All that individual assessment is based on merit right now, and the institutional assessment is also based on merits to a great extent, and then the assessment of proposals or projects, right? Assessment is therefore something we still need to work very much on. I mean, in terms of facts and figures, we can move forward, but we're not doing that badly. A lot has been done recently, so we can be proud of that. I think that facts and figures are improving, but we need to be very careful here. We shouldn't just say, okay, we've got parity, so we're giving extra points to positive discrimination in projects, etc., etc. That's fine. Well, of course, we shouldn't stop doing this, but the challenge ahead of us is that we shouldn't just be happy with that. What else can we do to incorporate the assessment at all levels, personal, institutional, of the projects, that contemplates and includes this gender perspective? I think that is very hard. We should think how we can do that in actual terms, right? And the recently created coalition to move forward in research, COARA, right, has been mentioned this morning. And there we're talking about a more qualitative assessment, an assessment about the impact that the research carried out has at all levels. I think there's a lot to be said about that. We need to discuss all of that, and we need to take into consideration here the need for this, for the need for gender equality. We need to have this approach. I mean, we're assessing something equally for men, women, etc., etc. But that's not equality. That's not what equality is all about. That is something to have homogeneous assessment, but it wouldn't be an equal assessment, right? So at the university, we know that things happen very slowly because it's something really big. And what we need to do is to change our perspective concerning assessment, and that is going to be hard. Yes. Okay, Fernando, what are the difficulties that you have detected? Well, the Vice-Chancellor mentioned and touched upon a topic that I believe is key concerning this difference between homogeneous and equal assessment. At Ikerbasque, especially when we are assessing emerging careers, that this scissor effect is there already. Not very much developed, but it is already there. It's already happening. And given that the development of a research career requires postdoc stays at international research centers, for instance, and if possible at the highest level, that leads to a situation where in this very critical moment in their lives, when they're starting their personal and professional lives, individuals have issues. And it's been proven that in the case of women, this variable can lead to additional issues concerning ulterior development, career development. So there is a lot to be done in that sense. And we also need to have the possibility to open brackets. I mean, we at Ikerbasque are working on that as well. This means that we need to be very flexible when assessing pathways where we have different elements of personal lives going in. So we need to be able to open some brackets sometimes in our lives. Because you may analyze someone and say, okay, maybe this person could have been better in their stay at Oxford, but maybe that person had some personal issues or family issues there. So we need to be able to, you know, take those brackets, what's in between brackets into consideration, because, you know, there are personal issues that could have an impact on our professional careers, and these type of variables need to be included in our assessments. And we also need alternative measurements. We shouldn't just measure everything on the basis of impact factors or quartiles, whatever. The DORA and the COAGA are changing these assessment systems little by little, but we still need to work on that pretty much. Yes, so we're going back to cultural factors. Dr. Schriebingen mentioned we need to take the scientific elements into consideration, but also cultures. In Nordic cultures, for instance, when a boy or a girl, before they go to university, they take a year off to clarify their ideas and make up their minds. That's unimaginable. It would be unthinkable here in Mediterranean countries. We would be told that we are being lazy if we took a year off, right? So that's something we need to change as a society. Yes, absolutely. That's important. And so in the places where decisions are made, we need to have female assessors, and we need to have people with a lifelong pathway that is much more receptive to this type of variables that so far have not been taken into consideration, or not that much. And I know that the selection panels and the assessors at Ikerbasque take all these elements into consideration, more and more so. It is also true that sometimes we've had cases of researchers, female researchers, that are reluctant to include these variables. Why? Because they believe that being the patronizing, right? And some female researchers don't want that, and this is totally understandable. Although sometimes I believe that we should all be all have an open mind, a more open mind. Most of the people that are assessing applications and projects currently are very open to this, and I would say, I don't know how to put this, I don't think this is negative. It's not seen as something negative to a professional career. It's all right to have brackets, right? Because you're going to be a mother, because you need to care for someone, right? Yes, we need to be very sensitive, right, with all these things. And what are the difficulties you have detected in your experience, Silvia? Not just the ministry, but in your previous experience. Well, there are many factors there. and a few of them have already been mentioned here. What I think is that we have a model that is not or has not been designed to put people center stage. This model has been thought to escalate, to climb, to compete, but it's not working out. Well, I mean, one of the problems we need to face in science and innovation in Spain, we see the transferring knowledge, is hard for us. We make headway, we publish papers in science and technology. They need to have an impact, because if all these research studies don't have an impact in our society, what's the point? And knowledge transfer, unfortunately, is something we're not very good at. And in that sense, I believe it's key to maybe assess all these publications in a different way. There is a different way to assess research and to assess the real, actual impact of papers, publications, and research studies. We need to measure the transfer that's been carried out and how this has an impact in the improvement of our society. And when we are assessed in a qualitative way, we know what happens, right? If we look at the numbers, at least with the numbers, we have a guarantee. You said, if I have to score 4 here, well, I get 4 and that's it. So in this paradigm shift, there is a move towards a more qualitative assessment, and I'm concerned about this. I fear that maybe what women do is sees this impact we've mentioned before, John and Jennifer impact, right? So we need women in the assessment panels. But the fact that they are women doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have prejudice or preconceived ideas, just as men, because the education we've received in this sense is exactly the same for men and women. So we need to rethink the whole model. We need to try and place care and people center stage, and from then on we need to change the way we assess all this. Otherwise we'll be doing the same thing over and over again, and change will not be real, and we won't be having a real impact. I think this is the right way to do things. Yes, well, BRTA, Rikardo, we've worked on that, and we have a methodology and our own way to transfer knowledge to society. Yes. I was listening to you, and in previous talks, I was thinking that, well, we have identified a problem, which is that there are very few women in the field of technology, and it goes beyond everything that's digital. Now we're talking about technology of materials, etc., right? And we say, okay, men concentrate more on things and women concentrate more on people. I think that's something that we need to change. What do I mean? Well, the hardest technologies also have an impact on people. It may not be that linear, but we live in a society where we are doing quite well, or well off, and we have a very strong industry, among other things. This is quite objective and visible in the Basque Country. Why do we have this strong industry? Well, among other things, because it can absorb technology, because we've been working on that for many years. We've been working on this technology transfer for a long time, and therefore we generate high-quality jobs. And so all of this has an impact on society. And this comes from this more type of hard technologies, right? And maybe a child will not understand this, but if you talk to a teenager, they will understand. And maybe you're giving them a purpose. And they won't just choose degree that has to do with biology or health. So these are things we need to be thinking of. I think that BRTA members have really understood the importance of this technology transfer to society. And another of the problems we have been observing is this scissors effect. And well, that's something we need to work on. As we said, we need to be, to have these brackets opened, and these brackets need to be compulsory for men, because that helps women as well. Or when in a professional career you value leadership, we may need to think what type of leadership we're assessing here, or what type of leadership we want to have. Do we want to be more individualistic or work as a team? Do we want to be competitive or work in cooperation? We have a number of different dichotomies here. Professor Sayer mentioned all of these dichotomies this morning, and I believe that we need to learn from all of this. And we're talking here about a paradigm shift. Well, let's go for it. Why not?
Las pilas, ponernos las pilas. Antes de continuar, no sé si...
Right, are there any questions from the floor? Any contributions, any comments maybe? I see someone's raised their hand. Please, Mike, please.
Eskerrik asko por vuestras presentaciones.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I am a researcher at Ikerbasque, and I am a president of the Committee on Equality there. How can we get the other 50% involved? How can we get men involved here? Because I feel this responsibility myself of working to achieve equality, but I feel somehow that this parity that we need to have in different committees is working against us, because there are 30% women where I work, and we keep participating in a number of different boards and committees, and we don't stop. What can we do to change this? Well, by having parity, actual parity. I mean, if you have 50% chairs or professors or researchers that are women, instead of having this minority we now have, there will be a balance, and you will have the same pressure that is put on male researchers, professors, or chairs. That will be a collateral effect of parity, of achieving parity. But as we move towards parity, I believe that this problem will be eliminated, and you won't be suffering from it that much.
But at some point we have to give them a solution. We can't just keep telling them to be patient. And from that point of view, in my opinion, what we need to do is value what they do, value this. So these kind of care tasks that we carry out in the academic field, and it's mainly women who carry them out, we really need to start valuing these tasks. For example, if you get points for participating in evaluation committees, and the men are going to want to do it as well. I have absolutely no doubt about it. We just need to attach greater value it. No, the problem is that the people who are organising these panels always want parity, and because there are fewer women, then it's always the same women that have to go. Yes, no, I've experienced this firsthand. There have been a number of women in my department who moan about that, and it's true. But the problem is that in order to achieve parity in, I don't know, doctoral supervisors or a commission, if there are only 4 of us there, then we have to be everywhere at the same time because there's only 4 of us. Because there are so few of us, it's always, you always have to sit on some kind of committee, or 2 or 3. But if it is valued, then at least you'll be compensated for your time and they'll recognize the effort that you have to make to do it. And then when we do account for half of the staff, then it'll be much more balanced. But in the meantime, what we can't do is say, well, you just have to be patient and we're not even going to value what you're doing. No, you have to value what we're doing. And it's not just with what we do, it has to do, I don't know, this occurs in many different sectors. There was a report published recently saying that female academics spend more time in tutorials. If interns come, we spend more time with them. If we have to lead a research team and we have researchers working under us doing PhD theses, we spend more time looking after them. These are care tasks. And this is what we've been taught to do. In working teams, they say to us, oh, yeah, your team's doing really well. Aren't you lucky you got a really good bunch of researchers? And I'm like, no, there's no luck involved there at all. It's the fact that we've looked after the members of our team. Well, listening to you, I interpreted the question slightly differently. I think the question was, how can we raise this awareness amongst men? Well, you can just give people points for doing it. That's what you do. How can we get men more involved in it so that we can relieve the burden on women? So if you value what she's doing, if she's been given points for doing what she's doing, then the men will want to be doing the same thing. Because nobody wants to participate. No one wants to direct departments. Well, that's another problem. I think we're talking about raising awareness. Women have to be quite militant about it as well, because the parity lists, etc. We might think it's ridiculous, to be honest, but it's the basis. It's the foundations. It's the first step towards changing the way people think and taking into account everything that Silvia is saying. I often have to sit on committees and be in. And then, of course, not just because I'm a woman, but I'm also a Basque speaker. So sometimes you're the only person on the list because you're a woman and you're a Basque speaker, so you don't have any choice. And it's really annoying. I get it. You know, I have to spend so much more time to doing all of this, much more than any man, which takes away time from other things. But I think there is no other way. It can't just, we have to go one step further. I think, for example, so I don't understand what the sort of the zip-like lists, that's one example. But because there has to be a minimum number of women and men, because otherwise one person says no, the next person says no, the next person says no, once it's a woman, then it's a man, then it's a woman, then it's a man. And the whole thing just gets perverted a little bit. If we have a Viva panel in which, you know, there has to be 3 men and 3 women, but it's not always as easy as that. And we have to avoid, I think, those sort of situations. It's necessary for us to have very harsh measures. It's good, it's important to make sure that we need to be insistent. But it's not always about numbers. It's not only numbers, but numbers are important. If there are 50%, if we make up 50% of the staff, then everything will be easier, but we still need to be quite militant about it. And we need to participate in commissions, on Viva panels, for example, alongside men, because there are fewer of us, so we're going to have to do it more often, and that's just the way it is. And if we say no, if we refuse to do that, I don't know, I think we're running quite an important risk, because seeing as we've actually achieved parity in many different areas with up to 40%, we have the danger of lowering our guard and we might not keep moving forward. And I think that in assessment, we really do need to keep making an effort. I think there was another hand up there at the back.
Sería notar que, por ejemplo, en Suecia, esta presión sobre las mujeres de estar en tribunales de
about women having to be on Viva panels for PhD students. So perhaps I think there's a problem there. We're talking about postdocs here. When female postdocs are trying to build up their CV, perhaps they can, I don't know, perhaps it could just help to make their CVs better if they're on more panels, or so that they're including postdocs in panels and councils. Well, I think it would depend on the legislation. But I would say that there are different councils or Viva panels for PhD thesis in which postdocs sit. But it's not the general norm. But it does happen. And it could, in fact, be a solution to include postdocs so that we can get more women involved, so that we can relieve the burden on those who are actual tenured lecturers. Yes, it's also a way of incorporating diversity. Because often sitting on a Viva panel, I mean, it's always the top experts that are called to sit on a Viva panel. So they're always top experts, they're always men. So it would be another way of exploring more diversities. Maybe we should just relax these demands a little bit with regards to professional experience and to include on Viva panels more junior researchers, more women, other groups. So yes, I think that could be a possible solution. I definitely think so, but we'd have to make sure that it wasn't just sort of like a patch, like a plaster covering it, but not actually healing the wound. We have to make sure that we have more women on Viva panels, for example, and more young people, both men and women. Yes, because in general, gender and age are two correlated factors. If you have younger female researchers, well, among the younger generation of researchers, there generally are more women, so there's a greater degree of parity per se. I just wanted to ask you something. We're talking about parity in Viva panels, for example, and I think that's important, but I would actually include any other type of selection process. There needs to be parity. And we have this problem in my centre, which is Materials Physics Centre. Anyone who has a responsibility for hiring, anyone who is on a selection panel, for example, or a selection committee, needs to have a minimum level of training with regard to gender perspective. We tried to do that in my centre, and there was mass rejection. I mean, we're talking about really serious rejection. People went and shouted at the director. There were loads of very nasty emails sent. They felt insulted. They felt very, very offended. When the director tried to implement this using an analogy, which I thought was, really quite telling, is that if we were actually going to give, if we were offering you a training course on fire prevention, you wouldn't feel offended, right? So why are you feeling offended with this? We're just trying to give you a training course on gender perspective. Why are you all so annoyed? Why are you all so angry? We didn't really get it. With the gender plan, what I felt personally was that we made it mandatory. We tried to make it mandatory, but we couldn't. But what was missing, I think, was that maybe, I don't know, a higher level institution, maybe the University of the Basque Country or the Advanced Council of Research, for example, maybe if you all made it mandatory, then it would be easier for us to make something like this mandatory.
Toma pelota.
Sí, hay que tener en cuenta.
I think that, unfortunately, this happens all too often. And we have to take into account the cultural microclimate which exists in different centres. And the only tool that we can use to combat this, and in Ikerbasque, we try to run these types of courses and activities. And also, the ability that we have to interfere in how each centre runs its staff is quite low as well. We can't interfere very much, but we are open to hearing about any kind of activity that would help push forward this cultural change, because it's very, very necessary.
Sí.
Sí, yo creo que eso sería una buena.
I think that would be a good action, just to raise awareness. I mean, this is, I think, very clear proof that we're not ready for this yet. That, yeah, we can have commissions that are 50% women, 50% men, or that's fine, but we're not ready to accept this. And I'm talking about men and women. I'm not just talking about men here. So I think the first step to raising awareness would be to carry out actions of this time. And I take note of what you suggested. There might not have to be all these actions compulsory, but perhaps we can have some checkpoints sometimes, which would be an incentive. It's not going to be obligatory, but we're going to do everything in our power to encourage it. I mean, perhaps they're quite harsh measures that are focused on numbers, but hopefully the idea would be to change the paradigm, to bring about this paradigm shift. We've been talking about a paradigm shift all morning, but we're not going to do that over the course of just a few months. We do have to finish now, but there is a person who has had their hand up for a long time now. No, I just wanted to say that we're talking so much about how we can include more women or no non-binary people in panels and Viber panels and councils. But perhaps we should also be thinking about how we should review assessment systems themselves, how we assess our researchers and our lectures, and how cronyism still exists to a large extent in universities. And it's not going to be solved just by making sure there are more women or non-binary people in the decision-making levels, but I think we need to just change the way we think about scientific production. We're talking about social impact of the research that is carried out, and often that's just measured in terms of patents. And maybe we should prioritize something else. Prioritizing patents when you're using public money to carry out the research, is that the best way we should assess the research being carried out? Sometimes it seems that, you know, the impact that doesn't have an economic impact isn't an impact. It's not economic impact, but it's social impact. And perhaps we should take that into account as well. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, but economic impact shouldn't be the only criterion used. There are many places in which people who have been assessed 20,000 times already have to be assessed once again, writing all these reports that no one ever reads in order to try to get a permanent position. It's humiliating, basically. Or perhaps it's just a case of not having updated a system that is in dire need of updating. I think that would be something that you need to look at. Yes, well, I think we could have another 5 roundtable debates talking about that, because we are talking about very important issues. But just very quickly, could you say something? This was the idea that I was saying before. We need a broader scale change. We need to totally rethink how research careers should go and how we assess them. It's an obstacle race. People who pursue a research career spend many years in precarious positions. They don't earn very much. They have no job security. They often have to move around from research centre to research centre, sometimes moving far away from their place of residence. It's something that is very negative, especially for has a much more negative impact on women than it does on men. Because it's generally women who still have to perform care tasks. They care for their family members, etc. And having to keep moving around, it's very difficult. And I think this is why there are fewer women than men in the research field. And we need to rethink the entire system, how we're assessing people's progress, what resources we're dedicating and earmarking to people. And it's something very cultural as well, as we've said many times this morning. If we look at the distance between the place where we're born to where we end up living, and if we look at someone who lives in Spain and someone who lives in the United States, it's very different. In Spain, we move away a lot less. In Spain, we tend to stay where we're born. And to oblige someone to move and live somewhere else for many, many years. I mean, if you're talking about just a fortnight, it doesn't matter. But if you have to go and work somewhere else for 6 months, then what are the advantages of this model? What's the advantage of having a model that's so complex? I mean, are we really getting better outcomes? Are we doing better science? Are we getting better innovations? And I think the answer is no. So I think we have to have a structural change, a deep-rooted structural change. That's what's required from a feminist perspective always, where we can see what we actually want to achieve and what we should be asking our researchers, both men and women, and what we can ask them and what we should be asking them in order to make sure that we do excellent science, but that they can also have a good quality of life. Anything else that anyone would like to add? Well, I think we'll leave it now because it is 2 o'clock and I know we have a very tight schedule. Thank you very much. Thank you to all 4 of you for your contributions. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Cultures are very different, but the patriarchal system is always the same. So we need to have a gender perspective always. Now, what are we going to do? Those of us who have been training for years, we're going to continue training, and we have workshops to do just that from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock this afternoon. And we're going to be talking about language. We're going to be talking about all sorts of different things. We have Maria Martin, who's going to be running one workshop. And we also have another workshop about tools to help us clean up the toxic air of scientific contexts. And we have Barbara Biglia and Alejandra Araiza from the Rovira y Virgili University. That's workshop number 2. And number 3 is entitled Principal Resistance to the Implementation of Equality Plans and How to Address Them. The Case of Gearing Roles. This is going to be led by Maria Silvestre and Maria Lopez. And we have also workshop number 4 entitled From the Shadows to the Stage in Search of Equity in Science. Gender inequality in science will be addressed and will be related to the world of communication. And it will be led by Eva Cuesta. So perhaps you can see how many women, how many men go to the workshops. You can tell me tomorrow, because maybe that's one of the problems that we need to sort out. Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure to be with you all, and we will see you at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Lunch will be served downstairs now, and we'll see you tomorrow.